Here we have our patient Jesse. Jesse is a 29-year-old male who's recently begun strength training. He's experiencing knee pain when performing the barbell squat. This is a front-on view of Jesse performing the squat. We will play the movement once through and then go ahead and slow it down and look at any issues that stand out. So now we'll take a look at this movement in slow motion. Just before starting though, I just wanted to note that Jesse's stance is quite wide here. The barbell position is also pretty high. And there's a lack of any breath retention or bracing at the beginning of the movement. We'll go through why this is important later on in the video. For now, we'll start the descent. You can see that valgus collapse quite clearly here. And coming down to depth, it is quite a deep squat here. It's not audible on the actual video, but there was a significant amount of crepitus, sort of cracking, popping at the knees for this movement. It's a little bit more stable on the ascending phase. There's definitely a lot of improvements that can be made here. I just wanted to talk about why the valgus of the knees is important. It's probably one of the biggest fundamental flaws of Jesse's squat. So knee valgus can indicate poor neuromuscular control and lack of functional strength of the lower extremity musculature. This may be due to decreased hip abductor and hip external rotation strength, increased hip adductor activity, or restricted ankle dorsiflexion. It leads to an increase in shearing forces, causing the overload on anterior, posterior, and collateral cruciate ligaments. In particular, is a moderate load placed on the PCL during the squat. This posterior shear force pulls the tibia back and places strain on the PCL. The strain increases as the knee flexes, and the force occurs after 60 degrees of flexion. So we'll take a look at this movement again now from a side perspective. I'm just going to play it through at half speed. So first thing to note here is that there is a pretty significant amount of cervical extension throughout the descent phase of the movement. We continue down, we do see a rounding of the lumbar. Again, that depth is quite low. The knees are coming quite a bit forward in front of the toes as well. So I just wanted to take a closer look at the cervical extension throughout the squat. So again, it is pretty clear here that Jesse is using a lot of cervical extension. He's basically looking straight forward, but there's no alignment there. So according to Meyer 2014, it is important to maintain the head in a neutral alignment to the torso during the squat to assist with a strong, balanced setup and a point of reference throughout the squat. Incorrect positioning of the head and neck may negatively lead to improper spinal positioning and tracking throughout the range of the movement. A deviation from alignment may cause compensation from another spinal segment. We could see that a bit actually with the lumbar region rounding out. That may be related to this. So poor body alignment in the squat resulting from incorrect head position may predispose the patient to injury. This may be dangerous as the patient does wish to increase the bar weight. So we've had Jesse make some adjustments to his squat now. We'll go into more detail as to what these adjustments are and why they're recommended. But just to notice to start with, the stance is much narrower than the previous squat. The bar position is lower. In actuality, it could stand to be a little bit lower than it is now, but still it is the lower position. As we play the movement through, we don't see any valgus at the knees. The depth of the squat is much shallower. And it's quite a strong, stable movement. At the beginning of the movement as well, it's not really visible, but there is the use of breath retention, Valsalva maneuver. Let's take a closer look at some of the adjustments we've made for this squat. The first instruction to remedy some of the issues surrounding the knee was for the patient to narrow their stance. So So a narrow stance may reduce knee compression forces and therefore is also recommended when prescribing the squat with clients with a history of knee pain. So Jessie was experiencing pain when performing this movement. I believe it's likely due to the valgus. As we play through, like this new squat has no valgus of the knees at all, is quite stable comparatively. So the next adjustment we'll have a look at in more depth is the bar position. So we've lowered Jessie's bar position. This is in accordance with research by Escamilla, 1997. So a low bar position where the bar is held below the level of the acromion is recommended as it causes greater trunk and hip flexion and reduces compressive forces at the knee. So now we're going to look at the adjusted squat from a side view. So as we go down, we're going to notice here that the depth is much shallower. The reason for this is knee compression forces progressively increase with squat depth. So when prescribing clients with a history of knee pain, it's recommended to keep the squat depth no greater than 50 degrees of knee flexion. This patient was advised to reduce the depth of their squat due to the knee pain. However, with the adjustments made, it would be advisable that the patient incrementally lower their squat depth over time, providing that the lower depths do not induce the knee pain symptoms. The reason it is recommended to increase depth of the squat is so the hamstring and gluteus muscular complex can be adequately challenged. Furthermore, increased strength gains from deeper knee and hip flexion may potentially reduce the risk of injury due to reduced quadriceps dominance. Having a barbell added to the squat movement places higher demand on the body to stabilize the trunk. One way to assist with this stability is the incorporation of the Valsalva maneuver, which involves breath retention throughout the movement and bracing of the abdomen in order to produce intra-abdominal pressure. Intra-abdominal pressure has been suggested to create lumbar stability by assisting with the formation of a rigid cylinder through the abdominal muscles. This rigidity can help maintain ideal posture through the movement, therefore preventing injury. The improved stability also allows for a greater increased transfer of force. So now we can look at these movements side by side. Just to note again that on the adjusted squat on the right here, Jessie is properly braced using the Valsalva maneuver, so creating that intra-abdominal pressure and therefore stability in the movement, which is quite noticeable. We're just going to play this through. So again, we've got the valgus collapse on the left-hand side of the initial movement, and we just don't have that on the right-hand side now once we've narrowed that stance. So that seems to be the biggest issue we had previously, and the stance adjustments fixed that by narrowing it. He's much flatter-footed, stable. There's no collapsing. Therefore, it's easier for him to move the weight and both carry it on the descending phase as well. Also worth noting is the bar position. It's a bit hard to see, but it is a little bit lower on the right-hand side. Again, that's just to reduce the compressive forces at the knee. So now we can look at the side angle next to one another. And just playing this through, it's pretty easy to tell Jessie is braced in the adjusted video, helping with that rigidity. We can see a much straighter spine throughout that movement, including much less in terms of cervical extension. It still could be even a little bit straighter there, but it's definitely an improvement. Coming down a bit further to depth, so we can see we've reduced that depth of the movement quite a lot. It's had a couple of beneficial things. So the knees are not going over the toes as they were in the first video. So here they're coming quite a bit over the toes, whereas here they're in quite a good alignment, as is the weight. So that allows for greater or ease of transfer of force. Coming back up through the movement. It's easy to tell that Jessie's loaded in the glutes, and he's pushing that weight up much easier thanks to that rigidity from the intra-abdominal pressure and everything being in much greater alignment. I think these adjustments have really helped his form. It can still be improved upon, but it's a great start. This concludes our video on the barbell squat. Thanks very much for watching.